So the Thanksgiving banner is in full swing over on the NA version of the game, and first up on the summoning rotation is going to be Beni Enma. Now, I told a lot of people to not sleep on this servant because she actually is very good, not just as a single target saber, but even as a single target arts DPS just in general. She's able to debuff the enemy party with some pretty nasty buffs. She's got very strong special damage mods herself. Her damage is very decent. And she also has some nice party buffs that she can give to people while also boasting decent survivability. And as it is my job to keep you guys informed on all of your decisions when you're going to go summon for a servant, I thought we'd go ahead and look at Beni Enma and talk about whether or not she is worth summoning for. Before we do that, before we begin, if you have not already, make sure you leave a like on the video and you subscribe to the channel for that sweet daily FGO content. Also, I usually stream every weekday starting at about 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, but as you can tell by the different quality of mic we got going on, I am on vacation right now. I will be back next Tuesday for your regularly scheduled programming, but still not going to stop with the daily uploads. The streaming, on the other hand, I might have missed a couple of days on vacation. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and start diving into Beni Enma's kits, starting off with her hits. And her hits are actually very decent with an actual really insane quick card that has 6 hits on it with 10.3% star gen. This actually allows her to drop a fair bit of stars, especially because she does have a passive that gives her 10% crit star drop rate, meaning that if you ever see this quick card in a Brave chain, it actually might be a good idea to go ahead and go for it. Not just for the fact that quick cards can also help you get to your NP, because they themselves also refund you a little bit of NP, not as much as the arts cards, but still nice, but dropping those stars could really help out our arts cards, where those are kind of just decent, right? They're nothing super stupendous. They're 3 hits a pop with 0.56% NP gain backing them up. Now, again, she has another pretty decent passive, giving her a passive 10% art buff that is not just going to be buffing up the damage of her arts cards, which includes her NP, but it's also going to be raising the NP gain of those arts cards as well. So if you do a crit and you feel like she's refunding a little bit more than someone with 3 hits with 0.56% refund is supposed to be doing, that's the reason why she's got a little passive buff helping her out. And I guess speaking of the other passives, she's just got some other generic good stuff going here. She has 20% innate debuff resistance, a passive 10% crit damage buff to really help out those crit buffs that she's going to be getting. And most notably, she is completely immune to having skill seal, meaning her skills will always be live unless she catches like a stun or a charm, but hey, that's what the passive debuff resistance is for. Speaking of some of those skills, let's go ahead and just start diving right into this. Her first skill is going to be giving her a little bit of survivability, giving her 1 turn of evasion to kind of block off any attacks for that turn, and 40% crit damage for 3 turns on a 6-turn cooldown. But actually, because of that passive 10% crit buff, this is more going to be a 50% crit buff for 3 turns on a 6-turn cooldown. And for anybody wondering, that is the same crit damage buff that someone like Waver is going to give to your servant. So to put into perspective how decent her crit damage can actually get up to with just her own buffs, you know, no Lady Avalon needed. Overall, it's just a very decent skill. There's not a whole lot to really unpack here. Just the 1 turn of evasion is going to allow her to have some survivability against enemy NPs, or if you just need that last turn to stake out the fight. You know, we've all been there where it's like, man, if I just have 1 more turn, I would win this fight. This can be very helpful for situations like that, and the crit damage is going to help her out in closing those fights by giving her extra bite to all of her face cards. But the second and third skill, this is where things start to get a little bit interesting. So moving over to skill 2, this is basically her debuff skill. I know it can be a little hard to kind of keep track of everything that this lady does, but just remember, skill 2 is for the enemies, skill 3 is for you and your buddies. Skill 2 is going to reduce all enemies' defense by 20% for 3 turns, reduce their critical attack chance by 30% for 3 turns, seal all of their NPs for a turn, and give them a 1k heal. Now, you might be thinking, well, wait, I'm healing the enemy. That's kind of preposterous. I don't want to be healing the enemy. I need to take them out. Well, 1,000 heal on the enemy is really nothing, considering that if you like click a quick card, which is supposed to be your weakest card, you'll probably do at least like 3,000 damage, right? Like at the bare minimum, even like neutral. Even resisted your quick card is going to do more than like 1,000 damage to them. So basically, it's just kind of like a lore thing that's there. It doesn't really matter as much for your enemies as it does your party. The ceiling of the NP is basically another form of survivability. If you don't want to use this skill for the damage, i.e. lowering the enemy's defense to kind of buff up her damage even more, you can use it for survivability. You can actually fire this whenever the enemy is about to hit you with an NP, and you can completely seal it off and protect not just Beni Enma, but the entire party. And reducing the enemy's critical attack chance by 30% for 3 turns is also really good because it reduces the chance of some random big crit just coming along and then just smacking you across the universe, while also doing the same for all of your allies because it's reducing the enemy's critical attack chance, and so that kind of helps out the entire party. Overall, very, very solid skill. You can use it to go on the offensive or use it to kind of protect your party. Either way is perfectly fine, and the cooldown is pretty decent on 6 turns, with 2 of those effects lasting for 3 turns. The third skill is where Beni Enma is going to start laying the hurt on the enemy. But not just Beni Enma, if you have other like pseudo DPSs around, they're also going to benefit from this skill. This is going to be giving her a 20% attack buff for 3 turns, but not just her, the entire party. This again is functioning kind of like her charisma. It's going to also charge the entire party's NP gauge by 20%, which is really good because even if you're not using like kind of pseudo DPS, pseudo buffer servants that kind of do a little bit of both, or a secondary DPS, this is still really good for like your Tamamos, your Waivers, your Avalons, your Castorias. All of those servants want to get to their NP to further support the party, and so by having just a 20% battery for everybody, it helps not only her, but your supports get to their NP, which have very powerful effects that can come back to help the party and Beni Enma finish off the enemy. It's then going to also recover the entire party's HP by 1,000 while recovering the enemy's HP by 1,000, but again, we don't really care about that too much because 1,000 for us means a lot more than it does for the enemy, because remember at FGO you do way more damage to them than they do to you, kind of relatively, right? Obviously I know someone's going to be like, man, I got hit for like 1,000,000 damage once, I feel like they're doing way more damage, but relatively so the heal is better for us than it is for them. It's why a lot of bosses will have like 20k heals per turn or something to actually make it meaningful, or like Demeter's got like a 50k heal to actually make it something annoying and you have to deal with, right? But she has one last final effect on this third skill, and that's going to be increasing the party's buff removal resistance by 100% for 1 turn. Now, if you don't know why this is a big deal, there's a lot of bosses in the game that want to just yeet all of your buffs off of you whenever they fire an NP. Either it's on a skill, or even it's like when you break their bar, they just remove your party's buffs. You can pop this in preparation for that to make sure you don't lose your buffs, which again makes her excellent for challenge quests. Because the closer and closer we get to JP, the more annoying these bosses are going to get with them wanting to yeet all of our buffs off of us to make sure that we can't just 3-turn everything, right? They're going to try to make things a little more difficult, and this is one of those servants that can kind of get around that. And so it's just a very, very nice effect to have because it's not just for her, but for the whole party. So if you know your buffs are about to get yeeted, and let's say you got like Solemn Defense from Castoria going, you pop this skill right before you break the bar, and then bada boom, bada bing, everybody gets to keep their Solemn Defense and any other buffs that Beni Enma or your supports might have given to everybody. Let's close this off by talking about her NP, which I know hasn't been buffed yet, and you know, in this age, everybody's got like a buffed NP that does a million bajillion damage, but for one, Beni Enma still does a respectable amount of damage. She's still pretty high up there in the NP damage charts. Even if you're not actually getting the chaotic special damage mod or the evil special damage mod, or God forbid you're getting both, she's still doing a very respectable amount of damage that's kind of just free. The only real things you need to have up for Beni Enma to do decent damage are her second and third skill, the defense down and the attack buff on the third skill, or just slap Castoria's buffs on her and let her go to town. But God forbid you find any chaotic or evil enemies, they're going to get a world of hurt coming from Beni Enma, because while it may not seem like a lot, it's only a 40% special damage mod starting at Overcharge 1, keep in mind, special damage mods are a different buff types than, say, attack buffs, and different buff types in FGO multiply into each other. Also, if you're using her with like Tamamo or Castoria, they can also give her a arts buff, right, which allows her to triple buff herself. And again, why Tamamo is still pretty good, Tamamo can give her an arts buff and an NP damage buff combined with Beni Enma's attack buff and special damage mod. That's all 4 buff types for Beni Enma, and she will absolutely rip and tear into whoever you point her at. Beni Enma is definitely really, really strong, and a servant that if you do want to go ahead and summon for, I'm not really gonna like stomp you for doing that. As long as you know the servants that are coming out for the rest of this year, and you're content to throw a couple of multis over at Beni Enma's way, you're not going to be disappointed. I've been using her more frequently on JP because that's where I've got her, and I can say from personal experience, not even having her skills maxed out, you know, having her at 444, she's already putting in some work in some of these more difficult challenge quests, and I'm really happy with her performance. And if I can kind of get some more materials over on JP, you know, can't wait for Christmas Lotto after this Lotto for different materials. I'm excited to see how well she'll do when I actually get her to 10, 10, 10. So there's kind of like my glowing review, and there's my praise for Beni Enma. If you don't want to summon for her, or you want to summon for someone like Muramasa, that's perfectly fine. There are other arts DPS servants you can use, especially in the Saber category, right? If you have like a high NP Saber Lancelot, you'll probably be fine. If you got the Dio Scurry twins, they're also really, really strong. But if you find yourself lacking in an arts DPS or an arts DPS Saber, or just a DPS Saber in general, maybe give Beni Enma a little bit of consideration. But with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will catch you guys in the next video tomorrow. Peace, late guys.